Hey, it's Jared. Today I wanted to talk about my 3 months of experience using Notion to organize and just really kind of have one place for all of the information in my life and my work and everything that I definitely need to keep tied together. Now, I've been a user of different productivity systems for a long time. I feel like I've been chasing the perfect one and just haven't found one that really worked out that well for me. And I've gone the digital route for sure with lots of different apps, whether they be mobile or desktop or a combination of both. And then also in the analog world of using different journals and books and different methods for trying to keep everything organized. Now, it's become a bit of a process for me because I am kind of a more analytical person. I like data, I like having everything organized, and I like being able to customize everything. But I don't like going so far down that road that I get stuck in a corner and then can't get myself out because I've created something that is kind of a mess. And Notion could definitely be something that will allow you to do that if you don't think about how you want to organize your data, essentially organizing your life and everything that was within it using this tool. Now, it's not only just a productivity tool that can be used for organizing your life. However, that is what most people are using it for. It can also be used for a lot of other neat things like building simple web pages with information, building like a Wikipedia of your own kind of thing, like a wiki. There's a lot of different things that you can do with Notion, but in the kind of life organization, getting things done, community, Notion has really taken off there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how I've been using Notion and how it's benefited me, because in all the years that I've been using different applications, I haven't been so compelled to talk about them and actually share my process because I've never really come across a method that has benefited my life and the way that I manage my life as much as Notion has. So let's talk a little bit about how I'm using Notion, the different areas of my life that I'm using it in, and I'll just kind of bring this all together. I'll talk a little bit about how you can get started using Notion, because Notion can seem very overwhelming at the beginning because it's kind of a blank slate and it's not as guided of a process as an application that was just good for doing one thing, like a to-do app that comes with a couple of sample to-dos and stuff in it. Notion has templates, but those templates, there's so many different things that you can do. All right, so let's dive into how I'm using it. I've started using it as my calendar, even though it's not as robust of a system for utilizing it as a calendar as a standard calendar. It's very much impossible to set recurring events. It's things like that tend to make using a traditional calendar like a Google Calendar or a calendar on your iPhone or even a third-party calendar app. It just is a little bit easier to use those apps. But the fact that I can utilize my calendar and tie it in with a lot of other information, I've been utilizing Notion for my calendar. Of course, I still am using my Google Calendar that I've been using for ages, so I am kind of duplicating my efforts there, but the information that I'm able to tie into a calendar entry in Notion is so much more robust than what I can do in Google Calendar. I feel like calendars like Google Calendar and the calendars on our iPhones and stuff like that are kind of getting a little behind the times just with that process and how they all work. Kind of how email has really, it's still something we use all the time, but it is really behind the times as far as a communication technology. So my daily log is another huge one, and I recently did a video on how I utilize Notion for my daily log, which is kind of like my journal, and then also how to build one as well, and I provided a template. I continuously tweak mine, so it's changing all the time, but I am in Notion all of the time, checking in with myself throughout the day, sharing my process in a way that I can go back and kind of measure my effectiveness, because I do have to self-manage. I am self-employed. I don't have a boss. I don't have a manager. So I do need to self-manage and make sure that I am being productive, that I'm getting work done, that I am moving forward in a way that is going to be scalable, and I utilize my daily log so that I can check in with myself and just make sure that I'm staying on task. I also have been utilizing it as my task manager. I had been struggling for the longest time in using tools that are a little bit better fit for task management, such as Todoist. I've also messed around with TickTick, and in the past, there's just a handful of, more than a handful of to-do, like task management type of apps. But I have recently moved that all over into Notion and have been utilizing Notion for that because I can tie tasks to projects and organize all of that stuff a lot better within Notion, having built out that system. Whereas I would have my tasks over in Todoist, those tasks didn't talk to my projects that I was organizing in Notion, and so it was kind of a process that was disconnected. And though managing tasks is a few extra small steps in Notion, it's a much better system for me, and I'll definitely have to talk about how I'm task managing in Notion in a later video now that I have been doing it for a little while. That leads to the next two, which is my video project manager. You may have noticed I've been putting out videos daily on this channel for a couple of weeks now, and I have a goal of hitting 40 videos in 40 days, which is quite an undertaking. But on top of that, I'm also producing content on Ditch Auto and State of Tech, my other YouTube channels, and those channels are much more involved than videos like this. And so I'm talking about smartphones and cameras and all of that stuff and giving examples, and so there's a lot of organization that goes into my video projects. I'm looking at one of my video projects outlines right now as I talk about this. This outline is tied into a to-do, like a task in my task manager section. It's also tied in to the fact that I need to film this video and the different processes that I go through as I film, edit, if there's any additional footage that I need to film, my publishing process, and all of that stuff. It's all laid out in Notion so that I always know where I'm at in a project. I used to get lost in my projects because I'd have to jump around quite a bit. Client project manager as well. When I'm working on projects for clients, not all the time can I just sit down and knock out an entire project for a client. I have to request information from them and wait for it and all this stuff. And so as I jump between projects, it's very important that I remember where I'm at, that I have an easy way to track all of that, and then I can actually tie that project to a client so I can look at all past projects that I've done for that client, look at all the communications that have taken place and whatnot there. So it's very easy, instead of searching through email, looking at old files and directories and stuff in Google Drive and moving all over the place, just trying to piece together where I left off. It was really a pain, that process, and I've streamlined it using Notion. My client CRM is what kind of holds all of those client projects together. So I base everything off of like a client name, and everything is underneath that and can tie into that. So it's easy for me to go from the client to all the projects, to all the tasks, to any important communications and stuff. Very cool. And I've also done this for my personal life as well. I have friends and relationships that I want to, of course, build and maintain and make sure that I am staying in contact with those people, and time slips away from us. So I've built out that personal CRM so that I can stay connected and make sure that I am communicating and maintaining those relationships, because I can get busy and let those slip away, and I don't want that to happen. People are very important, and I want to maintain those connections. I've also started using it as a notebook. I was using Evernote, and I still use Evernote for some things, but most of the time I'm doing all of my note-taking and any thought processing and stuff like that in Notion, because I can tie it to other things, and that's important for me to be able to tie that to tasks, be able to tie it to projects and whatnot. Very important. And also videos like this. A lot of things that are in my notebook become a video later on. The web clipper is also really nice. Of course, Evernote and other apps have web clippers, so where you can, while you're browsing a website, you can save something to that app. But what's really nice with Notion is I can easily do that. That also goes into a specific database, which I can then tie into other things and link to it. So if I'm saving some research for a video like this, I can link those up to my outline and have all of that information accessible there. Very cool. I also use it as a goal and habit tracker, as I've talked about in previous videos. Definitely the goal tracker was a pretty big one, and I'm utilizing that throughout this year. And I've also been kind of building a habit tracker, which is something I was using another app for. And what's nice about doing that in Notion is that I can tie that to my goals. I can connect everything, which is pretty awesome. All of these databases stem from my dashboard, and most of them are relationally tied together in one way or another, which makes it easy for me to access information, link it together when I need to, and relate it to each other. Real quick, I want to talk about Skillshare. Skillshare, you probably have already heard of. It's an amazing platform for learning new things. I always jump into Skillshare when I have a little bit of extra time and chip away at some courses on some topics that I want to learn about. It's very much all about learning and expanding from the professionals that are out there doing great things already. You can get 2 months free of Skillshare if you sign up using the link that I've got in the description below. That 2 months will definitely get you through multiple courses if you dedicate a little bit of time each week to watching some videos. Let's expand those skills and definitely do some cool things in 2020. Skillshare will help that happen. Use the link below to get 2 months free. So how do you get started with Notion? That is definitely a question I've seen pop up a lot, and there are a lot of different answers to that out there. If I had to start all over, what I would do is actually start by building out a flowchart. I would put a big circle right in the middle that would be me, and then I would branch off of that in all of the different areas of my life. You need to determine the areas of your life. For me, that is my family life, which is like my household, anything that has to do with my household, which includes my family. I also have personal, which is anything that is me specific, which could do to health or friendships and stuff like that. Anything that is outside of the household but is pretty much just me, and even things that are household related but are just me, I would put into that area. I also have my own projects, such as this YouTube channel and my other YouTube channel. I have my digital marketing agency, Hill Media Group. That's an area. And so I build out these areas as secondary kind of branches from the main area, which is me. And then from there, I look at all of the different aspects of those individual areas that I need to manage. So for example, for household, I would have my wife and each of my kids. I would have the house itself. I would have any other aspect of the house, and all of those would be areas that would branch off of that. And so that way I can more easily set up Notion and have areas as the main structure for my life, which makes it much easier than just setting up tons of databases and kind of getting lost in that. So you'll want to build tools that help you organize those areas as well. And each area is going to need to be organized different. That is why other applications tended to fail me, because I would try to utilize that application to organize everything. And while some of them did a good job of organizing your household, the same application might not do a good job at organizing things that you would need for your work life or your business. And so for me, building out those areas and being able to customize them was very nice. It made the process very simple, and I've definitely talked a little bit about that in other videos. I've shown you some examples in this video, and I'll talk more about it in future videos. So tie those tools to people, places, or things. When you create a database, how is that going to be structured, and what are you going to tie that to? Is it a CRM like my client or personal CRM, where everything underneath that, like tasks and projects and meetings and getting coffee and all of those things are underneath a business name or a person? Or is it a thing like a project? So for example, this YouTube channel, I would branch everything underneath this YouTube channel, and of course I can tie them to other areas as well. Or is it a place, for example, like the household, where everything in the household is a place and everything stems from that? So think about how you can tie everything together as well. If you start by tying everything together by something that's common in each of those areas of your life, it's going to be much easier for you to build out underneath that. Otherwise, you'll do what I did at the very beginning, which is build like a little database for every single thing that you think needs a database, and then realize that a lot of those things probably should have either been part of a main database for that one item, or you should have just organized that and structured it a little differently, because now it's very challenging to get all of those tied together so that you can access them from each other. Remember that your database is basically just a spreadsheet. Of course, there's a lot more that you can do with Notion than just a standard spreadsheet, but think of it as rows and columns and how you would set up a spreadsheet. If you were going to go and build out a spreadsheet to track something like your budget, or time that you spent with your kids, or time that you spent at the gym, think about that and set it up that way. So you're thinking about your rows being specific types of information that you want to organize. For example, if it is for fitness, it might be scoring your food intake for the day in one column, scoring how many steps you took with your Fitbit, scoring whether you went to the gym, and so there's these different columns, and then your rows are the entries. And so think about the columns, which are the areas that you want to collect within that database, and then the columns are going to be the individual entries. So if you think about it like that, you can also make sure that you're structuring your data. Then when you do export it, it's going to come out in a nice spreadsheet looking format, which will be easy to import into other types of applications. When you get a little too carried away, like I did at the beginning by putting databases inside of databases and stacking that process pretty deep, where almost every entry had its own database, that becomes a little bit challenging to export down the road, and you definitely want to avoid that at all possible. It is cool that you can do that, but just because you can do it doesn't mean you necessarily should. So I kind of jumped the gun there on things to avoid. You definitely want to avoid creating too many databases, and like I said, databases within databases, because a database is essentially kind of like a spreadsheet, and if you're putting spreadsheets inside of spreadsheets, then when you export your spreadsheet, it's going to be a little bit tricky, and you're going to end up having to export each and every one of those, and then the next application that you go to, or maybe the next way that you want to organize or structure your information, it's going to be a little bit challenging to kind of merge all of that and get it together. So I've simplified things by trying to do as much as I could in a single database, and then only creating pages when needed, and only creating additional databases when I absolutely needed to collect a bunch of information within a more specific area that I didn't want to clutter up the master database for that area with. I know that's a little confusing. I hope that I explained it well enough. If I didn't, definitely ask any questions down in the comment section below. And so don't create pages when you don't have much data to add to them. That was something that I was doing. I tended to do that with my daily log. I was creating a page for each entry, and in that page I really only had like a little bit of information. It was definitely something that I could have added to a property in the database itself, which essentially is another column. And so I've gone down the road of utilizing columns, which are properties, more in Notion than actually just building out pages, because pages are great, but you don't need to have pages built out for just little bits of information. I think it's kind of wasteful, and it's definitely going to make the export process a lot more challenging later on down the road. And also, if I wanted to use that data for different purposes, not necessarily to move from Notion to something else, but to import that data into another application, it would be impossible if I kept going down the road that I was previously on. So I have some more structured resources coming. I have a Getting Started with Notion course that is just about done, and I'm ready to launch it pretty soon. If you want access to that, definitely sign up using the link below. I'll make sure that you get access to that course. It's going to be a free course, and it's basically just a getting started guide for using Notion in a way that's going to be scalable and to help you understand what Notion is capable of. I just want to provide resources because I spent a lot of time trying to figure out Notion, looking at what everybody else was doing and consuming their information. And while there is some really good information that's out there, each of us has specific different use cases for Notion, and I definitely think that the more of us that are sharing that in a way that makes sense and a way that is organized and helpful, it's just better for the Notion community all around. So some closing thoughts. Of course, Notion, like I said at the beginning, has really kind of changed my life. Essentially, it's made it much easier for me to organize things that I used to really struggle to organize. So I feel more organized. I love that everything is connected so that I can tie things together and I don't have to jump between different applications that don't really talk to each other. I can track what's important, which has really become something that is important in my life, to be able to track and manage different aspects of my life so that I can look and see how I'm doing. I mentioned at the beginning, I don't have a manager, I don't have a coach that is keeping tabs on me at all times, and so it's very important for me to track and be able to look at the data and see where I'm at, see how I'm doing, so that I can correct and move forward at all times. I also like being able to access that from anywhere. Of course, Notion doesn't have an offline mode yet, but I can access all of my information anywhere and work on things at any opportunity I have. So my last bit of advice is really just to take your time. It's super easy to dive in too deep and get lost in an application like Notion, and then you go back to using a previous tool that would seem to be a little bit easier to you, and it probably doesn't have the feature set. That definitely happens. I've seen a lot of people say, Notion's too much for me, I just need to go back to what I was using. Organize and track what's important to you and do it in a way that is sustainable so that you don't get overwhelmed with all of the different things that you can do in Notion. Just because you can hit plus, apply a template, and go doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be scalable. And that is something that I learned early on in working with Notion, and of course has been just a standard lesson that I continuously learn in my life. So that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for checking it out. If you have any questions, ask them down in the comment section below. Don't forget to go sign up for my upcoming courses. I think they're going to be super helpful to you if you're trying to figure out the best way to utilize Notion in your life. But again, thanks for being here. Click that subscribe button on this channel if you haven't already so that you could be notified when I put out new videos. And I hope to see you back in the next one. Take care.